Hello everybody, this is Fernando for the latest Urban Legends video. Alright, let's go ahead and let's do another entry here. It's actually based very loosely on a previous suggestion from a couple of months back. It happens every now and then where I'm looking at a suggestion and I'm researching some info on it, I come across another thing that's somewhat tied to it, and then it finds it, at least I find it to be more fascinating than the current subject. So such was the case here. So when it comes to this entry, this happens to do with something I've never heard of before, if but for the fact it was just loosely tied to the original suggestion. And this is a place that after reading this info, I would just love, absolutely love to go visit one of these days. Hearing it, especially when it comes to the mystery surrounding it, there's definitely some fascinating stuff here. I mean, imagine him visiting this place, especially at night when supposedly this stuff takes on a whole other life. And it has to do with this. It's known as the urban legend of the Oregon Vortex, but it's also known more locally as the House of Mystery, because there's a very specific spot tied there to this Oregon Vortex that has a lot of things happening there. So let's go ahead and let's talk about all the fascinating info associated with this urban legend. So what is this Oregon Vortex or Vortex? It's actually a place, it's a location that you can travel to this day there in Oregon. It's called Gold Hill, to be specific. Once you go there, you're going to come across a location that's this. It looks very touristy, doesn't it? Because in fact, it's turned out to be a popular tourist spot. That's why I said I would love to visit something like this, because it's open to the public. You can visit there anytime you want. I'm sure you have to pay a small fee, but you get to experience the place right offhand. So many of these places that I talked about are off limits, like they're in places where you can't really go there because they're owned on private land, or maybe in some cases they're owned on government land, and so they're restricted. But no, here in this case, you do have a location you can visit to freely. And I'm pretty sure, again, that they would have some kind of more private tours, probably at night, for some of this mysterious stuff. But the way the story goes, this is an urban legend area because this location has always been known to have, for lack of a better term, bad juju with it. Like, it's a place that's just considered to be off limits. In fact, it was known so far back that in the time period of the Native Americans, they called it the Forbidden Ground. This was a location that even they shunned away from, and this is because they believed that there was some evil spirits that happened to be staying in that location. I mean, how much more tantalizing do you need when you have something involving like a Native American land, the stuff that's considered cursed or forbidden, that just pretty much covers so many wonderful spots when it comes to go into a place and finding it so mysterious. But yes, even then, the Native Americans, their horses stayed away, so they in turn stayed away. They considered it that forbidden ground, and then lastly, like a strange zone. So it was left untouched, as is, for a good while. And then it cut to a little bit later in its history, sometime in the early 1900s, there was a company there that decided to do some gold mining. This was a place, apparently, maybe it might have had a bit of a gold rush, but at that time, a company decided to set up shop there. In fact, they established something known as an assay office. That reminded me, by the way, of one of the tours I took in Las Vegas, where there was yet another location there that was very, very mysterious, very haunting, in fact, and it was also within an assay office. So when I saw the two linked here, it made me realize, how cool it was that this stuff happened. But yes, the company was called the Old Gray Eagle Mining Company, and back in 1904, they set up that office there, kind of like as a location for the gold mining, and then also as a little mini tool shop, and then they just started mining away. What they found out was this. What they found out later on was that some strange stuff was happening. I don't know if it was something that was impacting their gold mining per se, but it definitely impacted the house, because you can see right then and there what's happening. The house started leaning downwards. Interesting, no? It was built on land, presumably as like any other house would on any other piece of land, and yet it slowly started to sink diagonally right into the ground. And if you see like this picture, for example, you'll see, at least back then, how far it has sunk. It's probably sunk even more up to today's time period. But yes, if you go there, you'll see how it's curving downward. But if you go inside, the actual location, this is where the Oregon Vortex takes into place. If you go there, you'll find yourself actually standing upright. So even though this house is actually leaning downward, you won't have anything like, let's say, falling to the side type effect. No, in this case, you'll be able to walk around normally. Also, on top of that, there's other locations both outside in the forest area and then more in the open area too, where if you go there, the vortex comes into play because you're supposed to experience like a shift in heights. So apparently if you go to one place, perfectly normal ground, you're one height, but if you go to another place, perfectly normal ground, you're a different height right there. And there are pictures online that I was seeing of people testing this effect and realizing and finding out that it truly comes into place. So you'll for example, suddenly see yourself either taller or shorter based on various spots. On top of that, there's also these ghostly occurrences that happen in that location. Part of it is tied to the gentleman who originally discovered the area and was there and set up shop for a good while. His name was John Lister. You just saw him, in fact, in that picture there too. He was someone that came from Scotland, set up that location, and then supposedly performed thousands upon thousands of tests, whatever it was there, or experiments within that area there too. In fact, it was up until his very death in 1959 that he was there at that very specific spot. So here he was, in this case, someone that was a geologist, a mining engineer, also a physicist. So it seems like he was more like a polymath, somebody that was just delving into so many areas. But this place fascinated him. So he set up that location there in the early 1920s after, in other words, I guess the gold mining finished. By the way, that finished back in 1911. So here in this case, you had something where it was only about 7 years of the initial gold mining. Who knows if the vortex had anything to play with them having such a short time period. But either way, though, in the early 1920s, he set up something there and then eventually opened the location to the public back in 1930. To be specific. So since that time period, it's been a staple in that location there in this case, Gold Hill, Oregon. And if you go there to this day, then you can absolutely experience these things, including the ghost of this John Lister. So yes, I was mentioning that he has apparently never left that location ever since his death in 1959. Tourists and then guides there state that they see his ghost to this day wandering around that location. That's what I was mentioning earlier. It'd be a perfect spot, and I hope they do if they have these nightly tours where you can stay overnight or maybe just wander around into the very, very late evening / night. And if you do so, then you can experience all this stuff without the mass tourists there. Instead, it's more along the lines of like a private group, and then you get to see all this freaky stuff happen at night. But yes, indeed, that's all the information associated with this Oregon Vortex. It's a location that's still to this day mystified so many people that have traveled there. One little caveat though to mention with regards to all that stuff, there's some people that state, and it's totally could be true as well, that they state to this day it's not something involving a vortex, it's not something paranormal, it's not anything like, let's say, mysterious or tied to any kind of evil spirits. No, it's just simply having to do with optical illusions. The idea that if you go there and you see these spots, if you see these odd angles, if you see this stuff where you look shorter in one area, different height in another area, the way the house moves and so forth, all it is basically a change, like what's called the gravity hill, which I've talked about in one of my past videos, in fact, tied into also optical illusions, also tied into forced perspective. So these three things apparently come into play here at this location, and you can't really necessarily rule that stuff out. I mean, optical illusions are true. I mean, you see those famous ones that appear on Facebook and other websites every now and then, and it's true. Like whenever you try to stare at it, it looks like something, but it truly is something else, but it's playing a trick in your mind. Such is the case here with regards to the house. Like I could totally see that as being just a simple optical illusion. The thing though that people to this day cannot seem to have a conclusive answer on has to do with that height change I was mentioning earlier. In fact, it was featured on a show called Fact or Faked Paranormal Files. I think some of you have mentioned that in the past as well about that show. But yes, they tested a lot of these items, a lot of things I just mentioned, a lot of these bad juju things, and they found that a lot of things were just simply optical illusions, but they could not rule out anything as far as that height change phenomenon. So that if you tie in one thing that you can't really find a conclusive answer to, that leaves the door open to the rest of the stuff too. So that was also a pretty fascinating note. But in any case, if anybody has any more info, anything I might have missed, please post those comments below. Anybody been there by any chance? If you have, you lucky bastards, you get to go see this place, this Oregon Vortex, in person. Let me know, post those comments, because it would be something where if I ever, for whatever reason, am in that area there in Gold Hill, it would definitely be on a stop. I would absolutely come there to go see this place in person, preferably at night. But yes, post your experiences. I was reading some of the reviews online too from TripAdvisor, and it looks like people are having a good time there. So it looks like it's a place that is popular with the tourists. So, all right, everybody. Thanks again as always. Take care.